and its protected lands and
Okay, here
marine
we go.
areas to an unprecedented extent, so that future and current generations can continue to enjoy them. In this, the 100th anniversary year of our national park system, our government will create significant new protected areas. We work with provincial, regional, municipal, Aboriginal, and community stakeholders towards establishing an urban national park in the Rouge Valley of eastern Toronto. Looking to the future, our government will engage a broad range of stakeholders on the
This is the
development
Canada
of a
drone
national
speech.
conservation plan to move our conservation objectives forward and better connect all Canadians with nature.
Committed to developing Canada's extraordinary resource wealth in a way that protects the environment. It will support major new clean energy projects of national or regional significance, such as the planned Lower Churchill hydroelectricity project in Atlantic Canada. It will engage the provinces, territories, and industry on ways to improve the regulatory and environmental assessment process for resource projects while ensuring meaningful consultation with affected communities, including Aboriginal communities. Beyond our natural heritage, Canadians also cherish our shared history. Anniversaries are an important part of how a society marks its collective progress and defines its goals for the future. A key milestone next year will be the bicentennial of the War of 1812. We will remember how those of diverse backgrounds and various regions came together to fight for Canada, ensuring the independent destiny of our country in North America. We will also celebrate the 200th anniversary of the Selkirk Settlement, which marks the founding of Manitoba and the early days of the modern West. Next year, we will observe Her Majesty's Diamond Jubilee, celebrating her 6 decades of service as Queen of Canada. And Canadians look forward in just a few weeks' time to welcoming their Royal Highnesses, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, on their first royal tour since their marriage this spring. Il n'y a pas de devoir plus.
The Government of Canada has no more fundamental duty than to protect the personal safety of our citizens and defend against threats to our national security.
Reintroduce comprehensive law and order legislation to combat crime and terrorism. These measures will protect children from sex offenders. They will eliminate house arrest and pardons for serious crimes. They will give law enforcement officials, courts, and victims the legal tools they need to fight criminals and terrorists. Our government will continue to protect the most vulnerable in society and work to prevent crime. It will propose tougher sentences for those who abuse seniors and will help at-risk youth avoid gangs and criminal activity. It will address the problem of violence against women and girls. Our government has always believed the interests of law-abiding citizens should be placed ahead of those of criminals. Canadians who are victimized or threatened by crime deserve their government's support and protection, and they should have the right to take reasonable steps to defend themselves and their property when the police cannot be there to assist them. Our government will reintroduce legislation to clarify and strengthen laws on self-defense, defense of property, and citizens' arrest. Our government will also continue to implement its response to the Air India report. En plus de défendre les intérêts de l'ensemble de notre nation.
In addition to guarding the interests of our nation as a whole, our government will continue taking action to address the needs and aspirations of every region of the country. Local communities are best placed to overcome their unique challenges, but government can help create the conditions for these communities and the industries that sustain them to succeed.
Communities are rich in history and culture, and generations of rural Canadians have worked hard and played by the rules. They should not be the target of unfair laws. Our government will act on its promise to introduce legislation to end the wasteful and ineffective long gun registry. Canada's traditional industries remain crucial to our economy. Our government has always stood behind Canada's agricultural, forestry, fishing, mineral, manufacturing, and energy sectors, and will continue to support them as they innovate and grow. It will also introduce legislation to ensure that Western farmers have the freedom to sell wheat and barley on the open market. Canada's Aboriginal peoples are central to Canada's history, and our government has made it a priority to renew and deepen our relationship. The contribution of Canada's Aboriginal peoples will be important to our future prosperity. Concerted action is needed to address the barriers to social and economic participation that many Aboriginal Canadians face. Our government will work with Aboriginal communities, provinces, and territories to meet this challenge. It will help open the door to greater economic development by providing new investments in First Nations land management. It will promote access to clean water and deployment of clean energy technology in Aboriginal and Northern communities. Building on the work of the National Panel on First Nation Elementary and Secondary Education, our government will engage with partners to make concrete, positive changes to give First Nations children a better education so that they can realize their dreams. We will also expand adult basic education programming in the territories to help to increase education and employment levels. Notre gouvernement.
Our government will also introduce legislation to ensure that people living on reserve have the same matrimonial, real property rights and protections as other Canadians. Canada's diverse communities are connected by shared values and aspirations, and by the willingness to lend a hand. This has been markedly evident in the response of ordinary Canadians to recent and devastating floods and wildfires. Our government recognizes the resolve and courage shown by Canadian communities in the face of adversity and will stand by them in their times of need.
We will provide the principled, accountable leadership and good, clean government that Canadians deserve. On first taking office, our government introduced major new accountability legislation as its first act in the 39th Parliament, and it will now move forward on its long-standing commitment to democratic reform. Reform of the Senate remains a priority for our government. Our government will reintroduce legislation to limit term lengths and to encourage provinces and territories to hold elections for Senate nominees. Canadians rightly expect fairness and accountability in the full range of government institutions that serve them. Our government will reintroduce legislation to restore fair representation in the House of Commons. It will take steps to phase out direct taxpayer subsidies to federal political parties over the next 3 years.
You see the deer?
It will support transparency for First Nations communities by requiring their chiefs and councillors to publish their salaries and expenses. Our government will also support the efforts of the public service to modernize the way it works so that it can continue to provide the highest standard of service to Canadians. En vue de combler les deux postes qui
in filling the two upcoming vacancies on the Supreme Court of Canada,
that was a
our
nice
government
walk.
will engage parliamentarians through the transparent process first used in 2006. Our government will also ensure that citizens, the private sector, and other partners have improved.
I like going for a walk out and back. Then I'm never too far from the car if I get tired.
And open dialogue.
Take pride in our history and look forward to our future as the true North, strong and free. From our earliest days, we've always come together to advance our common purpose, each of us ready to do our part to move Canada forward.
Building on the careful investments and decisive actions of the past 5 years, our government will move swiftly to deliver the next important phase of the Economic Action Plan. Our government will reflect the courage Canadians show in meeting the challenges of today and their determination to rise to those they see on the horizon. Members of the House of Commons, you will be asked to appropriate the funds required to carry out the services and expenditures authorized by Parliament.
And members of the House of Commons, let the work of our great
This is the Canadian throne speech,
support Canadians as they go
June
about
3rd.
fashioning a 21st century limited only by their ambition and imagination. May divine providence guide you in your deliberations and make you equal to the trust bestowed upon you.
And so, Governor General David Johnston completes the speech from the throne, his first speech from the throne, and the first of a Stephen Harper majority government. I'm Alison Smith. You're listening to a CBC News special coverage of this speech, and of course it lays out the Conservative government's plan for the coming session. So, listening to this with me is our National Affairs Editor, Chris Hall. As you suggested at the top of this, he really touched on all of the markers that were laid out during the election campaign. But what stood out for you?
Well, a couple of things. Let me just talk about tone, because at least in part, that's what people...
Okay, I'm gonna turn it off.